Do it for Easter, not Christmas. Now, the Berejiklian government's renewable energy bill passed the New South Wales Upper House last night. It took 30 hours of debate. I'm sorry, Mark, I can see the dark bags under your eyes. You tried as much as you could to stand in the way, but Matt Kean, the Greenie, got his way.
Yeah, well, it's got all the hallmarks of crony capitalism. Matt Kean, this Hornsby accountant, thinks he can pick winners in the energy sector. He voted against, or his party voted against, our amendment to lift the ban on nuclear energy in New South Wales. Matt Kean's against coal, Matt Kean's against gas. He just wants 100% renewable. And of course, it's a very risky plan because when the sun's not shining, the wind's not blowing, you need pumped hydro and battery storage. His plans in that area are very rudimentary. It's one level embarrassing. He says there's 8,600 pumped hydro sites in New South Wales. It's a satellite mapping exercise out of the ANU, and nobody's ever visited any of these sites. I visited those in my area in southwest Sydney when the report came out 3 years ago, and there were dry gullies and the town's water tank for drinking water up on the hill. So nobody in the chamber had visited these sites. The bill had embedded in it a new electricity tax in New South Wales because it's open now for the government to levy from electricity distributors money to pay for the renewables, and that levy on the distributors goes straight on the consumer electricity bill. So prices will be going up. There's an independent audit report on the modelling that hasn't been released that apparently shows that the policy will bring forward the closure of the existing coal-fired power stations. So, you know, Chris, we've seen this movie before. When they went renewable in Adelaide, the northern station closed and they had blackouts and higher prices.
Yep.
When they went renewable in Victoria, Hazelwood closed and they had blackouts and higher prices. And Matt Kean's now doing the same for New South Wales and the potential of massive job losses.
That is the only outcome, which is blackouts, the only outcome. I want to move off that now. Carolyn, you're in Perth. Your Premier. What do we say about your Premier? Mark McGowan, he's still refusing to say if you'll open the border to Victoria and New South Wales, even though each state has achieved the most strict infection benchmarks of community transmission. He's also standing in the way and not towing the line and doing his bit with hotel quarantine. So we've got Buckleys of getting these 30 or 40,000 Australians back for Christmas. What is wrong with this cat?
I don't know, and I'm still stuck over here and I'm still wondering why. Look, I don't know if you've noticed, but our Chief Health Officer, I think, is in witness protection because every time he speaks, he seems to say something that doesn't align with the McGowan narrative. So McGowan told us not too long ago that, you know, it had to be 28 days of community transmission free and then we would open the border. This week he backflipped on that. Now, back in July, in the Clive Palmer challenge, our Chief Health Officer told the Federal Court that there was a less than 1% chance of COVID returning to WA from states with no community transmission. He then told a parliamentary committee in October that we should reopen to states with no community transmission. Then the next morning, the Health Minister accidentally agreed with the Chief Health Officer. Then the Chief Health Officer had to issue a clarification, which was this lovely backflip, which then Mark McGowan tabled in Parliament and said, look, if you vote Liberal, you're all going to die. And then, you know, we move on a little further and then Mark McGowan says, OK, we're going to open the borders on the 14th of November. The borders are open for less than 24 hours, and this is in respect of states with no community transmission. Yep. They get slammed shut, you know, mid-flight in relation to South Australia when they had that kerfuffle last week. And then they're still saying that, you know, for Victoria and New South Wales, you have to hotel quarantine. Now, the issue is here that we're not ready. Just like South Australia, we're not ready. This winter, we have had record ambulance ramping, worse than the 2019 flu season. And in fact, October was the highest ambulance ramping that we've had in WA history. But instead of fixing that, Mark McGowan's out readying himself for the election, hiring 22 COVID spin doctors at the cost of $2.7 million to West Australian taxpayers.
Just outrageous.
And that's why our borders aren't open. We're not ready because that's not the focus. It's a political focus. It's not a health focus. But he's got everyone absolutely terrified, and hence why the status quo is the status quo.
Yeah, he's copying off Anastasia Palaszczuk because it worked there.
Absolutely.
It'll work in WA, but in the meantime, have a talk to some of these tourism operators in the far north and in the far southwest. They're not doing well at all. Now, Mark Latham, China continues this vindictive punishment of Australia. We've got more than 50 coal ships stranded off the coast. They're in various harbours. How long do you think this damaging spike will continue, and how long can we handle it for?
Well, we're supposed to have a free trade agreement with China, which is obviously not going all that well. I think Scott Morrison said some really sensible things earlier in the week about the relationship with the Chinese, and at one level, what they're engaged in here is mutually assured destruction. We need our exports to China for prosperity, obviously, but they need the imports into their country for their manufacturing and other activities, construction industry. So we rely on each other fairly heavily in key areas of trade. So the Chinese here are extending the dispute that's been at a political level about political interference in Australia, which has been absolutely stupid by the Chinese. I tend to think, Chris, that these difficult problems can escalate. You get media talk and crossfire. I would really urge the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister to have as much face-to-face contact with their Chinese counterparts as possible, not to weaken Australia's position, firmly put our position. But you normally find if there's a personal relationship at the top that's built up and a little bit of trust, you can solve these problems pretty quickly. It's a long while since Scott Morrison's met with Xi Jinping.
Yep.
It's a long while since we've had senior ministers in China or they've had them here. So the sooner we get back to stronger personal relationships, we can fix the economic relationships, which are very important to both countries.
I want to throw a question at you, Carolyn De Rosso, especially in regards to what the Australian reported this afternoon. The 10 SAS soldiers have been given show cause notices. I guess in some way we should be thankful that at least they get a say. They've got 14 days to do it.
Yeah, no, I did read that this afternoon. Look, Perth is home to the SAS. It's a big part of not a big part, but it's part of the landscape in WA. My feeling about this is when I look at this situation, it's a great big tragedy for everyone who's involved. And I can't possibly imagine that anyone joins the Australian Armed Forces with the aspiration of becoming a war criminal.
Of course not.
So something goes wrong somewhere along the line. Now, there are rules of war, and somewhere something has gone wrong. Now, people who are responsible for that need to be held accountable. I think that a show cause, I don't think anyone should be just summarily dismissed. But, there are very, very serious allegations that have been made, and we don't know to the extent that they have been tested. No. Yes, people need to be held responsible, but there needs to be due process and due procedure, because we do want people to join our armed forces. We want people to protect our country, and they need to know that even if they do the wrong thing, that there is the process in place where it gets dealt with appropriately.
Yeah, finally got something from a lawyer that I enjoyed hearing. Carolyn De Rosso, thank you very much for your time. Mark Latham,
Anytime.
You too. Thank you.